You should ask them.
Oops, I forgot to start recording. But anyway, now we're doing it.
Right, like, and that's what I'm saying about framing what they said to us last year in terms of what they said they would do, and then what in the past year, how much of that has come to fruition. And I don't have any of the details, but Dolores, if you remember him saying that, then we can frame it in that way.
But you could ask it in a way of saying, you know, what do you remember telling us last year, and what did you do and not do?
I think that's a better idea, Christine, mainly because of the fact in the event, because we did not record last year, right. that I may have remembered wrongly, right. and then
so they can. I mean, you know, it would be interesting to know, to see whether they remember that,
yeah,
and which part they think they've done and the part they haven't done or want to change or want to expand on, and so that's the way, maybe Paul, that's the way you may want to frame that. Yeah, I was going to ask a little more on the role side and say, you know, do they have any suggestion and change for the role now that they have been in the role for 1 year? Are they things that they think could change and could be different? And then the same thing for the full board, but you know, so that we pick up. Last year during the interviews, we picked up some information which were really good about communication, etc. And I think we, you know, Sabrina, we talked about it after that. So I think it's good to open that and say, is there something that is not, could be working better at the board level, right? So that's a different layer than what Dolores and Paul are talking about.
Yep, that's great.
So that would be my angle.
For my team, every year we do an annual review. We ask them to rate themselves on the levels of their competency. And it's always surprising for me to hear the answer, how they rate themselves, because people don't want, the first thing people always say is, well, I could have done this better. They never start with, this is what I accomplished. They always start with all the negative. So I'd be curious to use that same strategy to see what they say.
Right.
I love it. That's great.
I like that too. Right.
So I'm going to throw the grenade in the room. Do we address the reputational issue for Jeffrey? I mean, how it was handled in exec was really sort of saying that it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter to the borough president. Well, but
I think you may want to ask.
Yeah. So I
want to ask something. I would ask something slightly different and say, you know, a part of your role is representing the board outside. You know, when now, once you are the chair of the board, everybody's looking at you as like the chair of the board. And so do you think that's a big part of your job, to represent the board in every
capacity
situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just asking us as a committee whether or not we even broach the topic, because how it was handled in exec was more of, it's not board business, so we're not really taking a stance. Whereas how you're framing it, Christine, many people do view that you know, any board position, whether it's chair or not, you represent not just the board but the broader community. And you know, your actions at all times speak to that. And I think that's the way most of us that are in corporate America, we sense that as well. Like our actions do reflect on our employer and et cetera. So I'm agnostic to whether we bring it up, mainly because exec literally took no position and said that it's done. But I leave it to the rest of you to sorry, the cat is yelling. Leave it to the rest of you to whether or not it's relevant to have that brought up.
When the question comes of like, what have you learned? I don't know, we'll bring it up as like something that he learned for his leadership. And I think that's where we can expand. I'm hoping, I think, you know, as a leader, I'm sure this was a, you know, a learning lesson. And it seems like it based on the letter that he wrote to us. And I was there for exec how he addressed it. So I'm hoping that that could be an opportunity. But I do think it's important because, you know, it's different per se as a board, that the board didn't take you know, a position on it. But as a leader, right, it's different, because here you're saying like why you should be in this position or why you should not. And, you know, I would assume that he would say like, well, that was a big mistake and I've learned and I've moved past that. And, you know, I don't know.
But I think we should ask the same question of all of them,
Yep, that would be fair if we do.
because we have, you know, I've observed people talking and in certain, you know, situation where they clearly do not represent the position of the board, but they are not making the point of saying, okay, now this is my position and I'm not, you know, reflecting the board has a different position, but I'm not, etc. So I don't know whether I mean, I think we should be, especially if one's position is very much different from the one from the board. And then, you know, you have one of the executive committee members saying certain things publicly. Should they be aware and concerned about that? I mean, at least aware and careful about it. Let's put it this way.
Alice, Paul, do you have any thoughts on that line of questioning? Do we go there?
I would like to know the answer to his thoughts on that, only also because it's public information and public record, and that there's supposed to be an investigation, and she said that she might potentially do a lawsuit or some kind of suit against legal action against him. So it's not something we want to necessarily sweep under the rug, although there's no way to ask him this question and then not have a similar question to the other candidates that might be attacking their character, because that's what we'll be doing. So I hesitate asking, although at the same time would like to know where things stand. If the executive board decided to kind of just say this is not our business, I do feel that if the executive board made that decision already, then we should take the lead on that. I mean, I don't agree with that decision, but again, I'm not on the executive board, so but whatever the executive board decides on, I do feel like we should stand together as a board and honor that. What they said.
It's a good point.
Good point.
I think that in terms of this topic, Christine's point of we ask the others as well is, you know, you serve as a leadership role of a community board, and inherent in that is your behavior in all public situations, in all interactions with members of our community. What would you say? Would, you know, figure out a way of saying, how do you compose yourself in a public space, knowing that even though you're not publicly speaking necessarily for the board and on behalf of the board, you still are an officer of the board? And what steps will you take to make sure that Community Board 4 is always represented well in a public space? And we could ask that of all of them.
I think we should ask that of all of them, because that's so it's not specific to, you know.
Yeah, and in the undercurrent will be, listen, this year we went through a situation where an officer of the club made comments in public that were not appropriate for an officer of this board to say, and it had some backlash on the rest of us. It reflected on all of us. That behavior reflected on all of us. And even though it's not board business, and the borough president said it's not board business, and the executive committee is saying it's not board business, it still reflects on all of us. So how do you see yourself as a leader of this board, portraying yourself in a public space that reflects all of us on this board?
And I think we need to expand it a little bit on the positions of the board. You know, when people talk out there and say, this is what we like and what we don't like about, you know, homeless, affordable housing, etc. We need to be careful about what we are communicating.
Yeah.
And so it's just not,
if I go to something and people are talking to me about Hell's Kitchen land use issues, just generically, I'm not taking a board position, but I'm still representing Hell's Kitchen land use as co-chair of that committee.
yeah.
Even though the board may never have taken a position on an issue that I'm talking about, I'm still co-chair of that committee, and I
Right.
have to behave as co-chair of that committee.
Or
That's the
be
way we
very
can frame
explicit.
sorry, go ahead, Christine.
Yeah, or be very explicit that what you are expressing is is change your hat.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to go with, Christine. Perhaps the way we phrase the question is when we wear the hat of, when you wear the hat of a community board leadership, that stays with you across all of your interactions in the public. What have you been doing to ensure that you are consistently representing this board through all
And its position.
all engagement in your life?
Yeah,
And
because
its position.
you can't just take off the hat of CB4 chair, vice chair,
Yeah,
first
you
vice
can't.
chair. People don't think of that.
Right.
It's not like you have a Halloween costume and suddenly, you're some other character.
But
You're
you can
still
disclaim
the
it.
same person.
You can-
And
you
the
can
newspaper's going to pick it all up that way.
I mean, I think with, like people who have whatever job they might have and they have opinions about it and they're like, disclaimer, my opinions are my own. There's nothing to do with my job or what I do, this and that. So I think making that, saying that it's important. Like if you're you have a position about something that
Right.
you know that the board has differently or whatever it is, like these opinions are my own. They're not representing anything that relates with the board.
So considering we have 7 minutes before we get started, and we probably already have thought of possibly 4 questions that we would want to at least start with, we need to either dwindle it down and also create very short window of our speaking so that we can hear as much of them. I guess we should go around and figure out who's asking what. And maybe we keep each person asking that same question of all of the candidates. Does that sound like it makes sense?
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well,
I was going to ask, suggestion to change the role and any suggestion or change in the board in general. That were my 2 questions.
Okay.
I'm happy to ask what do you recall of you telling us you would do
Right.
in the upcoming year? What did you accomplish? What didn't you accomplish? And what steps will you take in the upcoming year to address those issues you raised?
I'm gonna
Mhm.
stick to how would you rate your accomplishments this past year?
Right.
Okay, Sabrina, you and I flipped for asking about that wearing the leadership hat.
and then like, what are the lessons learned?
Okay, so those are actually, we have 5 questions. That I don't think that they'll take a total of 15 minutes. So perhaps we ask all of them.
Okay.
Lessons learned, and then I'm asking about wearing the hat.
Cool. So
Going in any particular order?
in the order of Christine, Paul, Alice, then you and me.
Yes, and you're the chair, so you go last.
Exactly. Oh, thank you. See, I didn't know that.
No, I think Alice.
It's
should
not a
go-
rule.
I think Alice and Paul should go first, because this is about accomplishment and the past, and then I can go, and then you guys will go.
Okay. I love
Alice,
that
Paul,
Christine's so organized.
Dolores. Yes, love it.
All right. I'm gonna get the
who's
the
first,
hat. I'm just
Paul?
gonna be off camera for a second, sorry.
So
So it's
Paul,
Alice.
Christine.
Oh, it's Alice first.
Oh, me first? Okay.
Yeah. And then Paul second.
Yeah, rate yourself. How do you rate yourself? It's a great question to start with.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And you can say, what did you accomplish? You told us you'd do things. What did you do?
Slightly aggressive.
I'll have more words than that, Christine.
Right. Great.
I'll
Thank you,
throw in some
Paul.
French words to make you feel better.
I like it. What did you do? What was okay?
Make it
What
some
did you
more
say you were
water,
going to
I'll
do?
be
What
right
did you
back.
do? What didn't you do? Get to it.
Right.
Whatever are you questions, Scooby? He has to be part of it, my dog.
Yeah. He wants to know what's going on, right?
Yeah, I work from the office full time, so he's just, when I'm here, he's just like needs to be-
Dying to see you.
Well, I will not have my 20-year-old cat participate because it would be pretty sad.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
He's
It's like,
really old.
he thinks he's hungry all the time because he's not digesting
20?
food. Yeah, I've never had I never had a cat this old. I was gonna say I never had a pet this old, but my turtle is like 53. So
For real? 53
Yeah.
years?
Yeah, I believe the vet had told me you count the rings on the turtle like you count on trees. And at the time I got him, the turtle and I were the same age. So I'm just assuming that we are growing old together and we're both 53. So
And where are your rings?
yeah, I don't want to show my rings.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. Oh my God. Turtle. The whole thing, right?
Yes, my Gulf Coast box turtle.
What happened to, oh, you're showing, what are you showing to us, Paul? I couldn't see.
I was
showing his
showing my
ring.
wrinkles on my face, how many lines I
ring.
have here.
Paul looks like a baby. Forget about that.
Leslie wrote that she can still do 710. I don't think she understood that we're trying to move her up.
Cool.
Or she would rather do 710, maybe. That's a
Okay.
nice way of saying
Well,
it.
is Jeffrey ready to do, who's 6:30?
Yeah, he's there.
Let's start.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna
Is
start.
Alice there or she's gone?
I just had to get some water.
All
Oh,
right, okay, let's
okay.
wait until she gets in, and then okay, cool. I'm going to let Jeffrey in. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I didn't realize I had my work name up there, so I'm changing
So I was like, I'm assuming that's Jeffrey, so
that. Hi.
hello.
There I
All
am.
right.
Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Of course.
I'm actually going to be given the honor to start the questions. My question is more reflective of what you feel you've done this past year and how you will rate yourself.
Thanks for that, Alice. Well, first of all, I can't believe I'm having this interview again because it feels like yesterday that I was actually doing this. So I'm happy to be here. How I would rate myself, I'm really hard on myself. So I'm excited at the prospect of having another year because I've learned a lot and there's a lot to apply. And so I think I've done a good job of figuring out how to keep the board functioning in a way that we don't know whether it's going to be in person or hybrid, whether we're going to be subject to what executive order and when. I think that I've tried to be reflective of a lot of the new things that I'm hearing from new members and old members. Now we can incorporate a lot of those ideas to hopefully work together to get things done. I am proud to have brought some new folks into sort of the circle of leadership. One of them is on this call, a new co-chair of the Clinton Health Kitchen Land Use Committee, as well as just helping some other folks figure out new things to do, the Sanitation Planning Working Group, the Cannabis Working Group. One of the things that I feel like I talked about a lot last year and try to weave into a lot of thinking is what we can do for leadership development. Because as term limits start to really create board turnover, what can we be doing to make sure that folks feel empowered to be a part of board work and decision making and to feel like they're getting something from it as well. So that was a long-winded answer to say, Alice, to summarize, I hope that I think I've brought some channels for board leadership based on the fact that we're going to see more turnover soon. I've created a couple of new working groups, and I think I've done a pretty good job of juggling the balls of executive orders and hybrid and in-person and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Sure.
So as a follow-up to that, Jeffrey, you're right. It does feel like yesterday that we had this
Literally,
conversation. It's like, really, we're going through this again? And last year, you had a list of things that you were hoping to accomplish in the first year of your leadership. So can you think back to any of the, besides cultivating new leaders, are there other issues that you can recall telling us you wanted to accomplish? And do you feel like you have accomplished those, or are those still things you want to tackle in the upcoming year?
Well, I probably talked about housing, which will be a perennial issue, I think, always and forever for me. And I think we did a lot for housing this year based on our Penn Station working group, which, Paul, it was you and Christine and me really banging the drum on that loudly to make the difference there. And we did. We definitely, I think, took a really in-depth look at the affordable housing plan and added even more to it in terms of thinking about the state sites more holistically, not just one-on-one, and how we can leverage those sites on the whole for more affordable housing. Did it go as far as I wanted? No, I'm plain to admit that. But that's also the fun and the challenge of working on a 50-person board organization, of course. I'm trying to think what that list really was, and I feel like sanitation. Both I get paid. My paycheck job in the bid world is I talk a lot of trash because we do a lot with trash, and I am hearing already that our sanitation working group is resonating well, not just with the city but other communities, and that's really exciting. That once again, Board 4 is leading on policy making, just like we did with integrating affordable housing across entire buildings, not just stacking all those units on the bottom floor. That was a Board 4 policy for a long time. Yeah, I feel like
Oh,
I'm stuck.
I think if I can do a little bit of follow-up. I mean, I do recall you talking about sort of your own personal leadership style and what you would accomplish with that. And so how do you feel that has gone for yourself?
Well, as you know, I have a lot of fun, and I really enjoy running meetings and being a part of process. And I think that I have learned to get better about striking the balance between my whether not my interest, but the direction I want to see the community go versus where the board or particular members are going to be, and then how I can still be professional, provide process, and make sure things are moving forward, but also do it in a way that, like, I'm not just becoming a rigid monster because it's just about process and it's just about this. That I feel like is something that I'm continuing to mold and model through. And frankly, I think hopefully that happens forever, right? Like, that's something I think we can all acknowledge is a useful thing to keep happening.
Yeah, thanks. That's more the direction I was hoping you'll go. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Jeffrey, do you have any, after learning about the role and learning more about the board, do you have any suggestion or change you would make to the role, or any suggestion or change you would like to make to the board in general?
My first thought is multiply our paycheck by 100, but
it's still zero. It's still zero.
You know, it's fun. It's funny because I get calls of people's concerns and complaints, and because we share in our victories, and like that part of leadership is working through hard issues with people, and obviously, I knew that was going to be the case. I wish there were more avenues for ways to us to do things and get engaged. I was having a conversation with a board member today, and we sort of came to the result of, like, yeah, this is really important, but issues need champions. And we don't always have a champion for every single issue that's super important to our neighborhood. And I recognize that I can't always be that person. And I certainly recognize that, you know, not every single person can be that person. It's the structure of I guess, how we operate. I mean, I frankly, this is stuff that I would share with anybody that takes on this role, is really figuring out how to structure if you have a career, and how you manage that up against what is very, Dolores, Christine, you know this, it's basically a full-time job. It can be a full-time job. And so balancing that, but also I hope I'm sort of acknowledging what I think is my leadership style here is really, leading with a lot of faith and a lot of confidence in the members of our board to attend meetings on behalf of the board, be it co-chairs or members who are appointed to things. That's really important. I feel like I've showed up at meetings that Lowell didn't, because they were issues that were important to me, but there were meetings that he showed up at that I probably wouldn't, and sort of vice versa. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, look, I learned, I think, in the first week, you can't micromanage. I'm not a micromanager either. So like, thankfully that was the case. But Christine, I don't know definitively yet how I would change the role, because it's still about making sure we're able to have process, come to conclusions, make recommendations, develop policy. I think we've figured out, frankly, in the past couple of years, how we can have really effective working groups. You know, we've done this in various ways now, and we'll see if the cannabis working group can result in anything, you know, that has teeth in terms of policy. So I would say that is a useful tool that I think I've realized based on previous work through working groups. And so I think that would be a major thing to think about and share in terms of how that could be leveraged.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, just a lot of chairs have said it would be better if it was 3 years. What's your thought about that?
I mean, I agree completely, because again, I go back to conversation I had with Lowell, and I feel like others, like, we should redo our bylaws, but basically, or not redo, there should be a couple of touches, right, to the bylaws, not just about this, but in some other forms in terms of process and committee structure. And I say yes to 3 terms, but then I get concerned about term limits. And how will we ensure leadership if we, let's say everybody maximizes their 8 years, right? We got 4 2-year terms. 3 years doesn't leave a lot of time for sort of board turnover. So in an ideal management structure, yes to 3 years. Up against the bureaucratic fact that we're all going to get term limited out after 4 terms, I don't know that it's prudent from a board management perspective. Does that make sense in terms of, and you know, I think about how it is important to, I feel that it's important for folks who want to be in leadership on the board, also our leadership in committees, because you have to understand how to get stuff done there as you sort of carry that up. So while yes, Christine, 3 years would make, I would like that. From a board management perspective, I'd be a little concerned about it now.
Good, okay.
So Jeffrey, you mentioned it's a full-time job. You know, as chair, you represent the board, and so that hat never really comes off. So wondering if you can speak to how you are working to manage how you represent at all times the board. Yeah,
every day, Dolores. And you know, we had a conversation about this at exec last week, and obviously, you know, I made a grave error. This year, as I sort of explained, my tongue got caught in a horrible situation. And it is highly uncharacteristic of me. And in my conversations with the borough president's office and everybody before then and since that time, is really, you know, it doesn't leave you whether you want it to or not. You know, it's not like you're an elected official, but you are still representing a body of people, an advisory council, and that's really important. So I take that very seriously, and obviously not without even greater consideration for my choice of words, which I generally do think a lot about the words that I'm using. And yeah, I think that is the extent of it. Yes, there's board business and there's personal business and there's professional business, but unfortunately, sometimes those can all end up in the same shaker and fall into the same glass, whether it's chilled or not. And so it's also the struggle and challenge of leadership as well. And unfortunately, sometimes you learn the hard way.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Mm-hmm.
All right, to that, what are your lessons learned?
I mean,
You mean about everything, right?
Yeah, no, sorry.
Broadly.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
broadly.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, that I think this will be a constant for the rest of my life, is that things take time. And you can actually have a shared vision and a shared goal and get there in a totally, right, take two different paths and still end up at the same spot. That has been a fascinating journey, not just as chair the past year, but like as a board member. That's been fascinating to be a part of that. And it's really important to remember that things can still get done when that's the case. I think that's probably one of my biggest takeaways, frankly. And that, I mean, what have I learned? I know that we're extremely lucky because stuff like thinking about the staff that we have and how our board effectively utilizes our staff and how strong and effective our members are. That is why we were able to put things out like a policy recommendation that city agencies actually take to, not to heart, but to brain, to apply the policy. And I want to make sure that we continue to be doing that, and that the way that we approach things does have the city wanting to listen and expecting good things to continue to come from us, because that's sort of in our fabric on the west side.
Just have one follow-up on that. What did you learn about relationship with elected officials, with the council? I mean, that's part of the job in a sense.
Yeah, and it's funny. You guys, most of you know, my background is having worked for a number of these elected officials or in various elected officials' offices, and I have to say that I think it's given me a bit of an advantage in how I feel like I've managed the board's relationship with them at times, to both figure out how to get them to engage more, or sometimes, frankly, to not be afraid to tell them no, they're not speaking at any given meeting, or sort of like finding your place or figuring out how best to advocate. This came out of our meeting last week at exec when we were talking about the asylum seekers, and we weren't really coming to a resolution, but it sort of came down to, no, how can we direct our elected officials to figure out how to ask for the right pot of money? Because we need to do that. I also would say that we have a whole bunch of new in terms of elected officials, which I'm excited about.
Sorry.
I'm done, there, huh?
No,
Yeah. Well, look, it is a pleasure, as always, to be in any board 4 meeting, and I really am excited and look forward to hopefully continuing on as chair next year.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
So much. Have a good night.
Thanks,
You too.
Jeffrey.
Guys, I see Jessica there.
Okay.
So she's
Good.
coming in. So yeah, I'm surprised. Can somebody let Leslie know though? I feel bad.
No, she said 7:10 is fine.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm gonna let Jessica in. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Jessica. How are you?
Hi, Jessica.
I hope
Hi,
everybody's doing
everyone.
okay, Jessica.
Thank you. We're actually in a bit of a delicate situation, so you'll just forgive me for being masked and a bit quiet, but glad that I was able to sneak away and join you guys.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. I have the honor of asking the first question. And my question is more of reflective of your previous term and how you would rate yourself.
Wow, that is a good question. I was actually, obviously attempting to prepare for this a bit, and thinking, I said to Jeffrey, have we really been doing this since January? It doesn't feel that long, which means that even as I'm reflecting, it's like, well, those, like anything, the first few months are very new and you're learning a lot, and I've been very fortunate, I think, to have grown in my responsibilities in community board really quite quickly, and so I've had a lot of new first experiences, I guess is what I mean to say. So I guess I would rate myself I'd say that I have a strong commitment and a strong showing, and still a lot to learn, and have been really gratified by the experience of not only being first vice chair, but also now being Chelsea Land Use Chair, which I know is not what we're here to talk about right now, but has really just afforded me the opportunity to really learn more about community management and how much goes into every decision once it reaches the board level. And that's really been a very nice complement to my experience. So I would say, strong, but still lots to learn, and excited for really even just the rest of this term, much less hopefully another term, to continue to represent the board and be a partner to the board in actualizing our priorities.
Thank you.
Jessica, that's great. And I also want to thank you for sneaking out. I appreciate your commitment to this time slot. You just mentioned it's crazy to think that it's only been since January, and you've been doing a lot in running and new co-chair of Chelsea Land Use. And sometimes when we're running at that fast pace, we don't always look back at what we set for goals. And do you recall what you talked about last year that you were hoping to accomplish as first vice chair? And do you think you've done that, or do you think you have to address some of those issues in the upcoming year?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think one of the things I've been pretty consistent on, so I have to imagine I mentioned it in our last, when I approached the nominating committee last, was just the ongoing opportunity to bring in new voices, and to make sure that there's a lot of, ample community representation in our discussions. And I think while I still remain very committed to that, I think, COVID continued to lay barriers to really engagement in the way that is typically thought of. I mean, it's just much more, I think our old tools for that are still the ones we think of relying on first, in-person engagement and what that looks like. And also that there have been still a lot of issues that kind of come out of the pandemic that have been that the board has had to deal with. I mean, even if you just think of the discussion around in-person versus virtual meetings and how much time we've devoted to those conversations alone, crowds out maybe time to devote to other issues. And so I guess to answer your question, Paul, I think we do need to recommit ourselves to that, to the desire to bring in new groups. And actually just in last week's exec discussion, JD's comment about we were talking about bringing the capstone group together. For those who don't know, we have an opportunity to engage with the capstone group to generate some ideas for the West Side. And, JD rightly said, they don't need to hear the board's voice on this. They need to hear the community's voice on this. And, I think we need to continue to do that on issues that are already identified and that are on our docket, but that also we just need to be sure that we're bringing in the voices of the community on whatever the community is experiencing. And I think in that way, and also, which is a separate thing than just also elevating the platform of the board as a place that people can come, even if they don't know what their voice is yet, but that they can see it as a place that the board, a place to come to elevate their concerns or the ideas they have for our district. So I think that will be a perpetual, I don't think we'll ever be able to check that box and say, congrats, we've done it. I think that'll be, consistent work we need to do to engage the community. But I think there's definitely still more we should be doing in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Jessica, thanks for taking the time. So now you have done this role for 1 year or some. And do you have any suggestion around the role you have, which is first vice chair, things that should be changed, or to the board in general?
Well, one thing that I've noticed, which I would say is a great opportunity, which is that since becoming first vice chair, I personally feel much more engaged in the leadership of the board. And I have come to just so significantly appreciate how much work, frankly, Jesse Bodine has in moving this ship forward every single day. And, I think that there is, I'm the kind of person who, like, when I'm all in, I'm all in. To be a little bit out is hard for me. And I have appreciated that with each role that I have continued to take, or been offered the opportunity to take, it has really broadened my deepened my understanding and appreciation for all that happens. And I think I really have begun to see that as first vice chair. I almost wish I could have seen it even earlier, as second vice chair or even as secretary, because there's so much when you're sitting around that table of 50 people representing, as a board member. It's really hard to understand where did all this content come from? Where did all these decisions get made? And obviously so much of it is decades long history. I mean, you can't replace that through more engagement. I don't mean to suggest that, but so I don't know if that's, I guess, an answer to your question, Christine. I think not everybody is like me and needs to be all in, but I think that opportunity to expose people more to what is happening, the kinds of discussions that have been taking place in the different meetings, whether that's with the Manhattan Borough President monthly meeting or Jesse's district meeting, that some of that is rightfully, I can appreciate, kind of done by certain roles, but I think structurally also just limits, in some cases, people's ability to really feel invested in the full workings of the board. And so I would be interested in having a conversation about how do you address that? How do you make sure that all board members feel more informed and engaged in the kinds of discussions that are happening? And I don't know if that's something that would necessarily be the responsibility of the first vice chair per se, or a change to this role, but as a change to the board and board engagement would be something I'm kind of continuously sort of grappling with. And again, not everybody's like me. Plenty of people are happy to get their assignment, write their letter, and that's their contribution. And that's great, because we need those folks probably more than folks like me who require a bigger investment to feel so invested. But once I'm at this level, like once I'm in, I'm all in, and wish that we could have facilitated that perhaps earlier.
Thank you. Very interesting.
So Jessica, my thoughts, positive thoughts going your way and your family's way. So thank you for being here. You have a day job, but this also, even though it's first vice chair is a job, there's a lot that's going on. Sorry about that. But I'm just wondering, how you think about that hat that you wear of being a representative of the board, and how you manage being consistent in that representation.
Yeah, I mean, my day job, which actually does at times involve, certainly the borough president, or for those who don't know, I work for a large nonprofit and I run our emergency food programs, which have grown quite significantly during the pandemic, which has allowed us the opportunity to work more closely with, elected leadership. Though primarily our work is in Brooklyn and Queens, although we do work in all 5 boroughs. That because I guess our work is primarily in Brooklyn and Queens, at least as it relates to my work, I don't feel, I have not been confronted with that conflict of who am I and what am I representing. That hasn't really presented itself as an issue, although I will say that when Mark Levine gave me I think it was for Jewish Heritage Month, I was, awarded something, and he references my community board involvement. So obviously it's seen and it's out there that I'm engaged, but I don't think in any way the responsibilities of my work or my positions are ever at odds with each other. And I guess a little further to the point, which I could appreciate might actually be seen as perhaps a negative from this committee's perspective, but I joined community board having lived in Chelsea for 15 years but not feeling very deeply engaged in the local community. And I've said this in other interviews, and I don't know that it resonates with everyone, but it is how I felt, which is that a lot of my friends got involved when they had children in their local whatever, and then I didn't want to have to wait for that to happen to get involved, but I didn't necessarily see another outlet for doing that. Since that time, I've become involved in my synagogue or through other volunteer opportunities, but they're not necessarily district like block specific, neighborhood specific. And so in many ways, community board really does provide me the opportunity to have an impact and be involved with and know what's going on in our district. And in that way, I'm mentioning this and giving some of the backstory to say, like, I don't have other positions in our community that would necessarily conflict with this role, because this is my engagement in our local community. So again, that could be seen as a negative, but I've chosen to make the community board a place that I feel I can have the most impact at this time.
Great. Well, just to follow up to that, just thinking about, again, that sense of being a representative, do you feel that you at all times have a way to positively represent the board, and that you have thought about or have a way of managing how you, like, as you mentioned, the borough president referenced your community engagement when you were getting award that had nothing to do with the community. So how do you manage how you're perceived and the different voices that you might be speaking to and the different hats that you're wearing to always ensure that the board is being represented in the best light, considering your leadership role?
Sure. Yeah, I feel very capable and comfortable being clear about the roles that I'm representing and asserting that, so that there is no confusion. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing at community board and that I've become so involved. So, I certainly wouldn't be, I wouldn't be inclined to completely necessarily always separate them. I think it's important that when I'm meeting with Mark on a work issue or he's coming out to volunteer with us, that I make the connection. And, when Gail was Manhattan Borough President, I said, well, what are we doing about Stop the Chop? What had nothing to do with what we were doing there that day, but that we connect on those issues. And that was at the time a very important issue for the district. And so it felt important to represent. But I also felt very clear in identifying that was, not in my work hat, but in my community board hat, and that represented my concerns there. And furthermore, I guess I would just say that, some people, some people might say that I'm like a little more serious in how I present myself. Like I always try to, I guess I'm saying that to mean, I think I always represent myself as professionally as possible, and, take great care to make sure that, anything I'm affiliated with, that my actions reflect my highest respect for that, at all times, and take that as just sort of a default perspective of how I present myself. Maybe sometimes, my husband probably wishes I'd have a little more fun sometimes, but that's just part of how I put myself out there. So I hope that gives you, Dolores, more clarity.
I appreciate your serious side. So
Thank you.
You can tell your husband we'll go out and have fun, and we'll.
Same here. Again, thank you for being here. I'm really thinking of you and your family right now. Been here for almost a year. I am curious to know, what are your lessons have you learned, and what directions you want to bring your leadership in the last year that we have in your role.
Yeah. Well, the lessons I've learned are that I really did not fully appreciate before this year, truly, I mean, this is reason alone not to nominate me for this role, that I was so late to the game in fully appreciating the support and knowledge of and counsel of Jesse. I mean, I just am blown away that he gives so much. I mean, he's available really all the time. I know that's not necessarily, it's a lesson insofar I would say that anybody else really looking to navigate and understand the community and the community board should make friends with him. And that I was maybe a little late to really figuring out how much he could support my own engagement and knowledge. I think I'm continuing to learn how to find my voice. As you can imagine, I think Jeffrey is an excellent chair and also has a style that's very different than my own. And so, you know, how he did this role as someone who just directly preceded me is obviously going to be different than how I handle this role. I do think that I'm much more of a not much more. I don't want to, this is not in contrast to Jeffrey, but rather my style is one of more of consensus building and really it's less about coming in. I'm less focused on coming in with an agenda per se and more about lifting up voices and trying to find consensus and finding my own voice and how to do that with a group that, whether that's at the board level or as now Chelsea Laney's chair, you know, takes some learning and figuring out how to do, or at exec. And there are a lot of big voices that we have, which is amazing because they come with tremendous, not just history, but real expertise, which I deeply, deeply admire. And I'm, you know, a lesson I would say, Sabrina, is also, you know, at work, and I don't mean this to come off as big-headed or conceited in some way, but I really, all day, I'm an expert. I'm like totally an expert in my field. I'm speaking to, you know, like city, state, federal government, USDA, we're making changes. I don't feel like I'm an expert at community board, and kind of learning how to present in a new way. You know, I also have to learn how to navigate that and how to feel comfortable not being an expert, but being committed to, as I mentioned, consensus and to resolution. And I think that is something that I'll continue to want to improve on and strive for. And I think the board largely does a good job of. But you know, we have a lot of strong opinions and strong voices at the table to contend with. So hopefully that gives you some. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think that's all the questions we have. And again, the best to you and your family right now.
Thank you all.
you, Jess.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys
Jessica.
take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Do we lose you, Christine?
No,
No, she said she's staying.
Okay, so did we want to take the few minutes in between the appointed time for Leslie, or do we want to just pull her in?
She's not here yet.
Oh,
oh,
But I wanted, like, yes, just to, you know, collect her thoughts and until she gets here. Did we say 7:05 for her? Or
yeah,
7:10.
Okay, cool. So we have 5 minutes.
So
Carly.
I'm gonna sound like a broken record from last year, because I know I said this last year. I wish that Jessica were our board chair. And,
Yeah, you said that. I remembered.
and I'm saying that because what I was struck by is, and it's not about style, it's about she literally put community in the center of everything she was talking about. She did not focus on the board as the vehicle for getting anything accomplished. She really focused on being that that amplifier and that welcoming place for community to feel like it has an avenue for solving problems and a place that cares about their concerns. And for me, that speaks very much to my vision. And again, that's my point of view, my vision of what a community board is supposed to be. So I every time I hear Jessica speak, I'm just very excited that she's part of our organization, and so happy she still makes the time. And I'm happy that she's so serious. I actually appreciate that she takes this role. She took the secretary role seriously. She took the second vice chair role seriously, and implemented some really thoughtful things into our budget process, you know, building upon you know, what Jeffrey had brought to the table in terms of presenting to the board. And I think as a first vice chair, yes, she runs a you know, this public session, but I feel that she represents in a way that says chair, you know, that says like she is representing this community, and I very much appreciate and I'm thankful that she's staying with it.
I will second that. Alessa's still not here. Roberta is there, but I don't want to.
While we're waiting, does anybody know why we canceled our social again?
Oh, that's a good question. I think was conflict with other people's scheduled or something like that. But I don't know. Does anybody know?
I had a guess that it was just we didn't have enough people respond, but
Oh,
I don't know.
Oh, no, I felt that the last time was more like a venue issue. No,
Oh.
I saw the email and it looked like the venue was a problem, but I don't know anything. I don't know anything. It's just a guess.
If venue is an option, we did, West 42nd Street Magazine did that event, Christine, at the Concord. That was a great venue.
Except I was freezing. I mean, we were outside by the all the way at the end of
It was October, Christine. You should wear a sweater.
Yeah, I should have worn a coat, But
it was outside in October.
It was really cool. It was a very great place.
It was a beautiful
but
space.
It just happened that because of the weather and the wind, it was very cold. Very cold.
I agree. But if we did something at 5:30, which I think is when we were planning to do our social, and we told everybody it's outside, put on a jacket, because the other space was going to be the Bella Abzug Park, which would have been outdoors, but there's no wind there because they're not on the water. But that I had never thought about that space before for an event, and that I thought it was beautiful, standing underneath the Concord, and
yeah, that was really a nice place.
The sunset was spectacular.
Can we propose it on the next meeting?
Yeah, we can do that, but we can't do it.
It's almost winter.
It's winter. It's too cold now. You can't do it. We could do something inside though. They have a lot of spaces inside where they do events.
Yeah,
and then you remember when we did the board meeting once there?
Oh, that's right.
When I was the chair, we had something with them, and I said, "Oh, could we do the board meeting?" And we did.
Wow.
All the way out there in their conference room. So that's something we could do there. Can ask them.
And social after.
Yeah.
I like that. All right, I'm gonna bring Leslie in. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Of
I
course.
have the honor of asking the first question.
Awesome.
My question is more reflective of your year as being the second co-chair, and how you would rate yourself.
How I would what? I'm sorry?
Rate, R-A-T-E.
Rate myself from 1 to 10. I probably would rate myself a 10. No, I think actually this has been a really great learning experience. Me being second vice chair this last year was coupled with me chairing my first committee, WPE, and it was also tied to being chair of budget task force. So it was a lot in 1 year, and I think it was a really great experience. I would rate myself as still learning. I would rate myself as still listening. I think, I don't think anyone does a really great or a really bad job at this. I just think it's, if you're present, if you listen, if you're considerate, if you're hardworking, I think that's a good mark. I really do. This is a volunteer organization, we have to remember. And anyone who gives their time, I think should be given a rate that's pretty high to begin with. But then as you do more, or as someone motivates you, or this body motivates you to do more, then I think you learn more. So I think the rating, Alice, would probably get higher with experience.
Great, thank you.
Leslie, what is your kitchen finally renovated? What am I seeing back there? Am I seeing a full kitchen?
Can you believe it? I actually have an oven.
And that wasn't there last year.
That's your question. That's it. Move on.
That's my question. That's my one question. Move on to the next. But it ties into what my question is about last year when you came before us. You talked about sort of what you hoped to accomplish in the upcoming year. And how do you feel you've done with that for yourself? Did you get sidetracked? Are there things you feel like you did accomplish from your goals? Are there things you would hope to rekindle that you weren't able to accomplish that you want to do in the upcoming year?
I don't remember exactly what I said were my goals, but I don't think I was sidetracked. In fact, I think I was more focused as you become, and let me see, some of you guys, or at least half of you know this, or when you're chair of a committee and then being second vice chair, you're also tied with some other committee chairs. You know, you're on exec committee. You're closely tied to Jesse and Janine and the office, which keeps you on track. So Paul, I'm sorry to say I don't remember exactly what I said were my goals last year, but I do think actually I can't look back at this year and say, oh God, I wish I did that, or I wish I did this, or I really faltered at that. It's like I was saying to Alice, it's more of a growing experience. And yes, I mean, there are a lot of things that we want to put on the committee agenda and we want to get done in the community, no doubt. But I actually am pretty satisfied with my first year for myself, especially with budget task force. I think being second vice chair and taking that on is a really huge bite of the apple. And I tried to be proactive in many respects with that by getting letters out sooner and, you know, and trying to consolidate people's time so it won't be wasted in meetings. And I got a lot of help actually from Jesse with that. So I think if my goal was to grow and to facilitate good conversation, I think I accomplished that. I hope I did. I guess you guys would probably be a better judge of that than I would.
Great, thanks, Leslie.
Okay, so Leslie, now that you have done this role, and I'm talking specifically about the second vice chair, not the chair of the committee, for 1 year, do you see any suggestion you would have to change the role or to change the scope of what has to be done, or any other suggestion for the board in general?
I actually don't think there should be any change of the role. I think the budget task force is actually a really big piece of it, and it's a big chunk of time. I wouldn't take any of that away, because I think if it's diluted, it also, you know, it gets a little bit, it's a little more difficult to corral. So I think that's good with the second vice chair's position. And then I don't know if we should add any more of it, but it's interesting you asked that question. I actually had a conversation with Jesse and Jeffrey about the social media aspect that I remember I was asked this last year, and then I brought it up to them privately a few months ago. And I think I brought it up at exec also, that could be expanded. I know there's a lot of limitations and a lot of, you know, challenges with that, but I really do think we should have more of a presence on social media. I don't know if that would be necessarily a second vice chair thing. It might be a first vice chair thing. I don't know where it would, maybe a co-secretary thing. I don't know where it would fall. That I would like to see that. I think that's where everyone is going on social media. Again, I think it's a little tricky. But I do think it can be done very effectively. I mean, listen, all you guys know this. We go to press conferences, you know, we promote good discussion, we promote good programs, events. That all should be on social media. I mean, I think, Paul, didn't you talk at what was the land use thing you spoke at? That should be on social media, saying this is what the community board is doing, because then I think it kills many birds with one stone. A, it promotes us. B, it shows what we're doing, and C, it shows exactly what we're doing and how we're working, hopefully, for the community. So if that was a suggestion, Christine, I think that would be it. Again, I know there are limitations with that, but
Good, that's good, thank you.
you're welcome.
I'm a little concerned if you're co-chair of WPE and you're trying to kill birds. I mean, that's a problem.
I have to rethink my, yes.
I hope that's not the legacy that I left as a former WPE chair. You know, speaking of reputation, you know, clearly it's not a paying job, but it is a role and you represent the community and the community board. Wondering how you approach when you speak, how you present yourself so that you are ensuring that the community board differentiates from your own voice if it does, but also that you're representing the board in the best light. Just wondering if you can share with us your thoughts on how you approach that.
I actually do think it's important. I think it is. I think once you're on the community board, I think, and people know that in the community, not everyone knows that, obviously, but I do think there's somewhat of a responsibility. I mean, listen, we're volunteers. We all have our own lives. You know, things happen, things go on. I don't think we're necessarily public figures by any stretch of the imagination, as someone would define a public figure. But I do think we have a responsibility to hopefully be seen in the best light, because that's going to reflect on the whole community board, and it's going to reflect on elected officials. It's going to reflect on agencies we're working with. Again, you know, I think it's a slippery slope. But as far as I guess the second part of your question, or one of the parts of your question, was how do you differentiate your own voice from the voice of the community board, which is interesting. As a former journalist, we talked about this all the time. This was like a topic of many conversations. Like, you're representing a network and you have to be not biased and in everything you work on or attack, but yet you have your own life and you have to, you want to be opinionated in some way, right? So it's interesting you bring up that question, because we've had this discussion many times in my profession, and I am very seasoned at it, and I have been, very what's the word I want to use? I don't want to say brainwashed, but I've walked that line for many, many years.
Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
I know that one of the biggest responsibilities that the second vice chair has is the budget committee, and that's about to happen. But I'm curious to know, what have you been, like, your lessons, or what have you learned in the last few months in specific?
On the budget committee, Sabrina, or just in general?
No, in general. I know that, like, a big one is the budget committee, but that hasn't really started just yet.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, like, in general, what has been your biggest lessons in this class?
I think my lessons, it hasn't been confined to second vice chair. I think the biggest lessons have been just part of the community board as a whole. I mean, I think all of you probably know my personality, and there are certain topics that I can really get like so excited about and go off on. And I really think I've learned.
No.
You don't think so? By the way, we'll talk about the environment later. No.
Cruise ships, what? No.
Cruise ship,
Wait.
shore power, anyone?
Bueller?
I do think I've learned to, I've always appreciated other people's opinions, but I think I've learned that not to, it's not always, everything is not always on high octane, right? Like, everything doesn't always have to be revved up to 6, 7, 8, or 9, or 10 even. I think it's a long process. And I think working on the MTA site taught me that. I think working with the temporary shelters taught me that. These are very long, these were very, very long discussions and back and forths over many months, weeks, some months. And I think I appreciated that process more than I think I thought I would. I really did appreciate that process. So I think that's probably my biggest lesson, though I still will get excited about certain things. But I appreciate the Joe Restuccia he would call me up sometimes. He's like, Leslie, it's a long life. Like, it's a long process. We'll get to the finish line. And I think that is true. And I think that has helped me. I think that really, and that's the truth. I think that really has helped me in the last few years.
Thank you. Still have a few minutes. Does anybody have another question, or are we good here?
So since your kitchen's renovated, can you cook something up and I'll be over after this is done, since you're around the corner?
I can. I think Paul is first. He keeps bothering me for cookies.
He lives
Oatmeal
further
chocolate
away.
chip.
He lives
Oh.
further away. I can be there in 3 minutes.
I'll race you, Dolores. I'll race you.
Good luck.
Yeah.
So we say Leslie will bring the cookies to the party, to the social event.
Oh, yeah, when is the, so has that been rescheduled? No.
We were just talking about
We're
it.
just
We're
discussing.
confused.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
thank you, Leslie, for your
But if you
time.
think of anything else, I'll send you guys, I'll shoot you an email if you think of something else, I can follow up
You mean with cookies or cupcakes or something?
with questions. I
Oh.
get that too.
No, you're fine. So thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Leslie.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Have a
Leslie.
good night.
Bye.
Bye. All right, we have Katie and Roberta waiting. So just for the sake of a process, it's for the secretaries, is it 15 minutes or 10 minutes, or do we decide that on our own?
10 minutes should be fine.
Or
Yeah, I
like,
think-
let's just ask the same questions, give them how much time they answer, and we'll be done.
Yeah, I think for Roberta, however, I mean, just to give her the little bit of due process, you know, Alice had mentioned that there was that whole list of qualifications, you know, we might want to add that so that she has a chance to articulate why she wants to run.
Well, I
and-
couldn't, yeah, my question of what are your lessons, I cannot ask them there. So I'll probably definitely ask some of
And
those.
the rating doesn't work either.
Yeah,
And I
right,
was gonna-
of
but
course, so we
I-
guess we have to retool it for her.
I was gonna ask her, like, basically the same question, but what would you hope to accomplish?
Okay, so I guess one of us should be asking, why is she running?
Yeah,
Alice, do you want to start with that as our kicker offer?
I can do that.
And I'll ask, what is she bringing to the position?
Christine, do you still think, I think that the question about what you would change with the board or the position is still valid to have an opinion on that.
well, yeah, I think with not the position because she has not had it, but the
Right.
board in general, you know, what she has seen in the board and whether she has an idea.
Yeah, but I remember last year with the new co-secretaries, there was a discussion about having minutes online, recording things, interacting with Zoom. There were some things that I recall Blake and Katie both talking about in terms of what they would change in terms of the production of minutes.
No, we can ask Katie.
Yes, but you can, I mean, and you could ask
Okay,
Roberta the same thing,
Roberta.
like, what, do you
Right.
see anything that's happened, that you would think you would want to improve as co-secretary?
Got it.
That's a good question. How about I ask that instead of the reputational issue?
Well, I think she's still going to be an officer of the board. I think we should ask all of them that same question.
Okay. That's
Like, how does she plan, how does she plan to, she's going to now be an officer of the board, and in her public and non-public life, she's still officer of the board. How is she planning to balance that?
got it.
We can ask her both since she's new. Her can be a little bit longer. One more question.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So the only one that's challenged now is Alice. You have to start differently.
Sure. Why do you want to be secretary?
Why do you want to be here?
Yeah. Why would you ever want to be secretary?
Oh, don't tell her that. She might.
No, I know, I'm just kidding.
She did send a very nice email though, with a lot
Yeah, I
of.
know, I got the
I
email.
know, I
Very
got
nice.
it too. And that's why I want to almost certainly respect the process, because there's an earnest nervousness around this opportunity. And let's not squash.
Yeah.
No,
She's
absolutely.
been here since
Ever.
6 o'clock, and I texted her, "Hey, you're gonna be here after all," and she's just been staying the whole time.
Okay,
With
Yeah.
apology.
so
I'm
go
gonna
for
go off
it.
screen for 1 second. Just apologize. I need to take my boots off.
Do your thing. Drink water, everybody, or whatever.
Sorry, I didn't have time to change after work, so.
Yeah, I was in covering rain, but whatever.
All right. Here's Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, Katie.
Hello, Katie.
Hey there.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. We greatly appreciate it. I have the honor of asking the first question, and it's going to be more reflective of your tenure so far as secretary.
Okay,
How would you rate yourself for your last year?
as a secretary? Well, if the scale is 1 to 10, I'd say I was an 8. And I would say that Blake was a 10. So I have to say, Blake is a real loss that he's not continuing on as a co-secretary. He was awesome. And he and I worked well together. But yeah, I think as I said to
Can you
the,
elaborate why you think it's an 8?
yeah, so, and it may be sort of for bad reasons, but I really, really, truly am uptight about just there not being any mistakes and typos and things looking sloppy. Like I really care in a way that I probably shouldn't care so much about that. And so I think that I know that it's important that we have good minutes. I will say that my approach to taking minutes, I think it's really important, obviously, to reflect any votes and who spoke generally, but I actually don't think it's necessary or frankly appropriate to like record every single word that somebody says, right? So I think we got into a pretty good rhythm about getting all the important points captured and making sure that they looked professional and not sloppy and just very good, but without feeling that we had to, you know, put in every single word that anybody spoke.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's great, Katie. Thanks. So I can't believe it's been a year since we sat here and you had this conversation with us about wanting to be a co-secretary. And you probably recall that there were certain things you were hoping to accomplish in the role, things you might want to make sure were done successfully. So would you say that you've accomplished all those goals? Do you still have more to meet in the terms of those goals? Do you see something changing in the upcoming year to accomplish those goals?
I feel like we've accomplished most of the goals. I will say that I feel like we might even be able to streamline it a little bit more. But I really do feel that, not that I've spent any time looking at the minutes of other community boards, but I really feel like ours are good and very representative of what's happening. So I actually feel good about it. And I really do think that it's important that we, that there's just transparency, and that one way to ensure that our board has complete transparency to our community is to make sure that our minutes are well done. And I feel like Blake and I have worked well together in that.
Great, thanks.
So Katie, you just mentioned that you thought things could be streamlined a little more, and that's a good opening for my question, which is, do you have any suggestion for the role of secretary, or do you have any other suggestion for the whole board that you think should be addressed in the next year?
Well, I will say, I think a learning of mine this year, I assumed that I would be like furiously taking notes during the meeting. But what I've realized is like, that just doesn't work. And that I can sort of take some highlight notes, but that the only way to really do it well is to then set aside time to go back afterwards and to listen to the recording, that I can constantly stop and make sure that I've gotten things down, so I think that I thought that, because I'm so good at my minutes, that I could just do it the evening of, and that is just not at all the way it works, and thank goodness that we do have these recordings. And I will say, one thing that I think Blake and I talked about a little bit during the year that we haven't faced yet is that I'm not sure how it's going to go when we start doing hybrid meetings, and whether or not those recordings are going to be good, and that we're going to really be able to hear everybody and make sure that we capture everything well. So I am a little nervous about that, but we're just going to have to wing it, I guess.
Okay, so as far as streamlining, what were you thinking about?
So I will say, I think specifically when it comes to when we're having our public hearings and people are making comments, I do feel like sometimes we get a little too detailed about what everybody's saying. And I think we can be a little more high level about that as opposed, yeah. So I guess I feel like those things can be more streamlined. And we certainly have realized, frankly, that, you know, with some of our electeds, when they come on, they'll often clearly have talking points that they're reading from, right? And what I've learned is how lovely it is to reach out to them separately and say, hey, can I get a copy of those talking points, right? Like that really helps with the minutes. And so it's just sort of these little things that we've learned through the year that really sort of help facilitate things.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate.
Yep.
So Katie, we're appreciative of the position of secretary, and we've come a long way since I actually would have 10 pages of minutes, because I'm one of these people that I literally would write down everything everyone was saying. Luckily, when Frank got into the role, he's like, no, we got to figure out how to streamline this. But you know, the secretary position is still a member of exec, and it's representative of board leadership. And just wondering your approach to how you ensure that your representation of the board is separate from your own your other engagements, your other activities, as well as just ensuring that that you are mindful of the board in how you represent yourself and carry yourself.
Well, I will say it's interesting. I guess I haven't felt, or maybe nothing specific has come up this year or something, but like I haven't felt that I, as a member of the however many people we are, 5 or 6 member executive committee, I haven't felt called upon to act in that capacity as one of, you know, 6 or 5, as opposed to one of a much larger executive committee. But I think whether we're acting as a member of the executive committee, the bigger executive committee, or as just a member of the board, to be honest with you, I see it all as the same. Like it's important that we acknowledge that we are but appointed to this job, you know, and that we need to take it with the responsibility overall. So I don't see that has changed. That, you know, my role being co-secretary has made me somehow, have to act differently. I just think the whole thing, being a member of the community board, is important to act in a way that that acknowledges that we have a lot of people we're trying to be accountable to, and that we need to do that in as professional way as possible.
Thank you, Katie.
Yep.
To follow up with that, you're saying that, you know, we have a lot of people to be accountable to, and I'm curious to know what have you learned in the last year? What are your lessons in this job?
Well, I think, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you know, I learned that there was no way that I could really be focused on the issues of a community board meeting and be busily taking notes at the same time. Like I just couldn't do it. So I gave up, I think, after my very first meeting, and realized, okay, my secretary responsibilities are really going to kick into gear after the meeting, and when I'm listening to it again, you know, on the recording, and that it's important to just be present and engaged during the community board meeting, you know, and so I think was an important quick lesson, and maybe just one in humility, and realize I just can't do 2 things at once. So yeah, and I really think that it has been it's just good to be willing, you know, like, look, everybody is serving in multiple capacities, whether they're on the executive committee or not, right? But they're serving on various committees and everything else. And I think it's great, the people that we have on the community board. I think it's great that other people are stepping up to take Blake's place right now, or to take my place too, whatever. I just think it's lovely that everybody is pulling together and willing to serve in a very volunteer way, you know, to help our community.
Oh, I guess you don't know that it's just us, you and Roberta now. Jesse Woodrow.
Oh, okay. No, I hadn't heard. Okay.
Sorry.
So no one's taking your place.
What was going to be okay, even if they did. So it's all good. No hard feelings. But I think that was great that both of them, frankly, were willing to step up. And now that, so it was lovely working with Blake, but if Roberta's great or willing to step up too, that's awesome.
Does anybody have another question?
No, thanks.
Katie, thank you for your time, for
Cool.
being up here.
Thank you, Katie.
Everything.
Absolutely.
you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Good night. Have a good meeting. Bye.
Hey, Before we bring Roberta in, did I miss an announcement again? Why is Blake stepping down?
He doesn't want to continue with his position. I don't think he's going to renew his community board.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Oh, that would be a big loss.
No.
Wait, Katie is still there. Let me admit her very quickly to see what's going on.
I mean, she's not a. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
no,
she's
it wasn't the same.
gone.
Okay, yeah, I think he's this last. I don't know. That's what he shared with me, but I'm not sure if that still stands. But I know he won't continue on his.
No, that's too bad. All right. Well, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, it's very, very good.
Is Roberta here? Is she ready?
Yeah,
She's been here the whole time.
Oh my God, she's so
Yeah.
sweet.
I
She's
am
been
going
very
to
easy.
apologize to her because I did text her and I didn't text her back. So let's see.
Should we tell there's 6 other people in the race now?
I think she can hear you. Hi, Roberta.
Hey, Roberta.
I know she can. That's why I said it.
I'm sorry all this time I let you waiting there. I didn't had a way to communicate easily with you and let you know, like, hey, come back. So I'm so sorry.
The great thing about doing this virtually is that
We're doing other things. Okay.
you know,
I don't feel terrible now.
yeah, unlimited supply of drinks.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll start now. Thank you again for the waiting.
Absolutely.
Hi, Roberta. It's nice to see you. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. We greatly appreciate it. I've really enjoyed working with you, meeting with you in person. So I was thrilled to see that your name is nominated for this position. So I have the honor of asking you the first question, which might be challenging, but hopefully it'll be easy as well. Can you just tell us why you want to be secretary of our board?
Sure. So I'm particularly interested in the position, both because I think I have a pretty strong fit for the role, but then also because I am very excited about learning from and kind of carrying on the spirit of MCB4. Just to speak to my experience a little bit, in my work within project management professionally, I wind up organizing meetings, organizing the sort of thought process that goes into meetings, taking minutes, recording other artifacts, and then circulating them. And so I think it's a very natural fit for this role. And then also I really appreciate in the short time that I've been on the board, the ability to learn from all of the incredibly experienced folks who serve on the board. And I'm looking to kind of help one, continue that knowledge long-term, and then also continue to foster a spirit of, objective, open-minded, respectful discussion for both board members and then members of the public as well.
Thank you. That was a good response. I appreciate it.
It's a great answer, Roberta. So one of the things that I'd like to hear a little bit more about is sort of, if you think about, you say you had a role as being a secretary in other organizations, you've seen how this board is run and what the secretaries have done for this board. And just from that very narrow perspective of the role of secretary, are there certain things that you would say you'd want to accomplish as the co-secretary? I mean, it's 2 people doing a role, there are systems in place, there's practices that have occurred, changes in the way things are moving from in-person to online and all that. So is there a sort of a goal you would have for yourself in being secretary?
That's a really interesting question. In terms of a personal goal, I would be interested in seeing if there are places where process improvements could be made. But one thing that I think would be valuable for the minutes and then perhaps for the board overall is figuring out how to create the most digestible pieces of information possible. I don't think that I am alone in sometimes skimming over the minutes. And so if we can figure out a way to make minutes somewhat more digestible to folks, I think that improving the communication that way would be a personal goal, assuming that it's within the realm of possibility and has the support of other members of the board.
Great answer.
Hi, Roberta. So I think Paul stole my question. Just kidding.
I could do a
But
follow-up,
let's say,
Christine.
no,
That
no,
would
no, no.
fall
I'm
into
Before we
line
go
with
home.
Next question. I'm
I
just
could do a
kidding.
follow-up.
Follow-up is like, now you have been on the board. How long have you been on the board?
Since 2021, so not very
Right,
long.
right. Not very long, but you have seen how it works, etc. Do you have any suggestion or comments about the way it works and things you would improve, you would want to see changed?
Sure. So the first thing that I think is highly tangible that I think we could improve is ensuring that all resolutions are available ahead of full board meetings, ideally 48 hours in advance. Mostly this does occur, but just it would be really helpful in streamlining debate and allowing folks to have the time to really sit with those resolutions and digest them. I think that would be really valuable. I think it's also something that we could probably accomplish. And I imagine I'm not alone in that desire. Other things, I do believe that we should look very hard when considering what community input we wind up receiving, or the folks who come before the boards, and think very hard about whether or not folks are representative. And to the extent that folks who don't come before the board, to the extent that folks who come before the board are not necessarily representative demographically or otherwise of a community, try and figure out ways to reach out to folks, groups that might not be as well represented, but then also figure out ways to kind of, as experts in the community, fill in the gaps and say, well, this group's maybe not represented, or this seems very one-sided. So what is the other side of this, and to what extent might it be popular? I think that would be really valuable. I'm not saying that this doesn't occur, but oftentimes it's really tempting to just look at whoever shows up and say that's the community. And I would caution that that is the best practice, because generally folks who show up to a 2 or 3 hour meeting have knowledge and resources and things that, maybe a lot of folks in the community do not possess.
Okay, thank you, very helpful.
So Roberta, being co-secretary is not just about taking the minutes, it's also becoming a member of the executive committee and basically an officer of the board. I'm wondering if you've given some thought to how you may approach your own voice versus the voice of the board, which you'd be representing, and also your thoughts about how you would safeguard or ensure that you, being an officer, would be representing the board in its best light at all times.
I think that's a really, really important question, and one that I think I think anyone who cares really deeply about the issues of the community should probably be answering. I think if you care very deeply, you likely have a lot of opinions. Sometimes they're not always the opinions that other folks on the board hold. Just a story that's illustrative of that. During certain board-related issues, I had gotten reached out to by a couple of members of the press to speak directly to certain issues, specifically because I think they believed that I did not agree with the decision that the board made. I've always declined those types of requests because I believe the board does need to speak with a united voice, even when I'm not wholly in agreement with everything that it says. I fully intend, both respect and intend to uphold that. I do believe that it is important to speak with the united voice, even when I ultimately don't agree. We engage in some really thoughtful and respectful discussions. Sometimes folks agree with me, sometimes they don't. I think that's quite all right.
But that's great. I'm curious to know, what are the issues or the concerns you're more passionate about? Like Laura said, you're going to be an exec, you're going to be in a position that leadership and can bring into issues that concerns you, because we do represent the board, but we also individuals, and and I think Jeffrey was discussing this before, that each of us have different interests and each of us can be our own champion of one issue. So I'm curious to know okay, Serena, this is what I want, I'm very passionate, I'm going forward for this. So speak to me about those passions.
Absolutely. So I have 2 issues that I feel very strongly about. One I have done a great deal of work on, which is just the building more housing, land use reform, in ensuring that we have enough housing, that the folks who want to live here have the ability to live here comfortably, and that we're planning for all of the people who may live here in the future. This is kind of a long-term project, and I don't think I'm alone in caring about it. At the same time, it is so important on a community board to balance that with the comfort and thriving of existing residences, and to not ultimately sacrifice the livelihood of people who live here for future people, even though I care very deeply about them as well. And then the other thing, and this is something I've been working pretty actively with Leslie and Mardian on WPE, is reducing our buildings emissions and building emissions overall. Buildings are the largest source of greenhouse gases here in New York City, and the city is taking really proactive steps to reduce our emissions, both through Local Law 97's energy efficiency law, as well as Local Law 154 surrounding electrification of new buildings. It's vitally important, in my opinion, that we are supportive of these pieces of legislation, but also that we ensure that residents who, as well as cooperatives and other smaller buildings who have questions about them, get them answered, and that to the extent that there are issues relating to either the grid, costs related to retrofit, that these are being raised to the city, and that there are appropriate channels of communication to ensure that we are as successful as possible in reducing our emissions as a community.
Thank you. Does anybody has a follow-up question for Roberta?
I do. We didn't ask this of the other candidates since they were all coming back to positions, but I'm just curious. Clearly, we're all volunteers and there's a time commitment for what we're already engaging in. Just wondering your comfort level in terms of being able to give more of that time and being able to balance the job that actually pays you money versus the volunteerism.
That is a super important question, and one I thought about a great deal, because it is in New York City, you're always, choosing between 10 million different other things that you could be doing. We could all be like in the theater right now, but we're here. So I have a good amount of job flexibility doing a bunch of kind of consulting work and being able to set a lot of the meetings that I actually attend. And I do have the time flexibility in order to commit to the board itself. My understanding is just of the responsibility is just to reiterate is, it's related to attendance, minutes, and vote, as well as editing and circulating and synthesizing that information, as well as representing on exec. I do anticipate this will add several hours a month to the time that I already spend engaged with this work, but I think it is certainly something that I can manage.
Glad to hear. Thank you.
Any other question? All right, well, you're off the hook, Roberta. Thank you for waiting for 2 hours to speak to us.
Sabrina, does Roberta know about Jesse's decision?
Yeah, she knows about that Jesse's not running.
What?
Not Jesse Bourdin, Jesse. Yeah.
Right.
Think of all the confusion that would have caused.
I know. All right, well, cool. Thank you. Have a good night, Roberta.
Thank you guys. Have a good rest
Thanks,
of the day.
Roberta.
Don't stay up too late.
All right, so now I have to stop recording, pause recording.